Everybody wants progress until they realize that progress doesn't make life easier. It really just makes you strong enough to handle harder things. And in today's episode, we're going to break down the truth that flips the whole idea of progress on its head. So today we're going to unpack why things get harder is the real sign that you're leveling up, how the fitness flywheel works and why it makes every part of your life better, the reason new problems show up as you get fitter, and that's actually a very good thing, how to recognize you're actually on the right path even when it feels tough, and what to expect as you move through each stage of training from beginner to advanced, and finally, most importantly, how to stay consistent when the journey stops feeling easy. And my goal of this is that by the end of this, that you'll understand that why a few hard moments aren't actually something to avoid, there's something to lean into. And this is why fitness is so hard, because as soon as it gets tough, or as soon as it gets boring, or as soon as it gets inconvenient, people just stop. And that's actually where progress is made. Think of it like anything that's worth having in your life. Think of it like when you made your first promotion, or when you finally bought a house, or when you finally leveled up in any kind of area. It's really hard right before you accomplish the thing, and it really sucks. And the issue is that mentally we don't know how long this is actually going to take. And then once we break through it, we look back and we're like, man, that was so worth it. But man, the hardest part really is just not knowing if it was either going to work or not, or how long something was going to take to get there. And so the core concepts that we'll really be talking about is that progress isn't comfort, progress is capacity. And your life doesn't get lighter, is that you just get stronger enough to handle those obstacles. And the fitness flywheel is really the engine behind it. Now, I did a post about this a while ago for a Momentum Monday. Again, if you're not subscribed to our mailing list, feel free to DM me on social media, at Red Wolf Matt or at Red Wolf CrossFit. Just send me your first name and your email. You can add you to the list. I send out a Momentum Monday email every week, and this was one of the most popular, and this is one that people liked a lot. And it actually took me a long time to write this, because it's something that I've been struggling with, especially as someone who's been doing CrossFit as long as I have. I go through these ebbs and flows, and I really wanted to illustrate it in a way to where people can understand. Because if writing things down helped me break through my plateaus, I want to be able to pass that along to you, because this is not easy. Like, fitness is hard for me just as hard as it was when I first started, and it's hard to keep going. And that's the whole point of this podcast. And that's what I hope you take away from this. So let's get right into what the flywheel is. If you don't remember the post, which I don't even remember it, so I have it written down here, which I'll just read it off to you, is that, I've seen this in the gym 1,000 times, and I've personally gone through this several times throughout my fitness journey. And you start training, and then your energy improves. And then when your energy improves, your attendance improves, because you can take on more. And then when your attendance improves, strength and conditioning improve, because guess what? You're training more. And then when your strength improves, the workouts get harder, not easier. And the reason is because you can take on more. And then the harder workouts force better habits, sleep, nutrition, recovery. Why? Because you can take on more. And then finally you get better habits, and then performance spikes. Why? Because you can take on more. And then when performance spikes, new problems show up. Why? Because you can take on more. You can't get in the trend. I'm starting to actually annoy myself. Good Lord, I need to take a break. But for example, like a good example of this is there's a time, I'm sure, that when pull-ups are really hard for people. And then once they get it, and then they can do kipping pull-ups or strict pull-ups, or, they can do a few push-ups and then they upgrade to pull-ups. That's a very common thing. Or, a good nutrition example of this is that instead of just eating quote unquote clean, start having a salad once a week, then you start having to track macros instead. I mean, that is kind of overwhelming. I remember the first time I did that, I was really overwhelmed, because I'm like, what the hell is a macro? And what the hell is a micro? And then it's actually really simple once you get it. But an initial culture shock and the initial hump of getting over that is quite difficult. And pacing workouts instead of just surviving, because you'll get to the point where, we've all made this mistake regardless of your fitness level, of going out way too hot in a workout, and then you're just like surviving the rest of the time. And then you have to learn this whole other skill of pacing, of like, okay, well, where are the different gears I can shift into depending on the workout, the load, the duration of the workout, what kind of skills are involved, what kind of localized muscle fatigue am I going to see? There's all these different elements that start coming into play. And it's like, It's like playing chess, but with fitness. And that can get really frustrating really quickly unless you actually have a plan. And that's where obviously one-on-one coaching comes in. This is why we're such a big proponent of one-on-one coaching. Just dabbled in throughout your fitness journey, because we can fix things, or coaches in general, it doesn't matter who you work with, can fix things very quickly and then save you time and frustration along your journey, and avoid the burnout cycle as well. So, and every level unlocks a harder level. Just like you slay one dragon, like let's say you're playing Zelda or Cyberpunk, whatever game you play. Okay, I haven't played Cyberpunk, but I played Zelda on N64. And I remember, it was the first actual real hard game I played on Nintendo 64, that and GoldenEye. And I remember playing that, and it was the Ocarina of Time classic. I think most of us played that, or at least I hope you have. And I remember playing that, and then I remember kind of complaining to my sister, because my sister's 7 years older. She beat the game before me, and I was like, man, like this level is just really hard. And I didn't understand the concept that the levels in video games get harder as you progress. Because again, this is the first one that I really actually played, and that actually, had a progression to it. And she was like, yeah, I mean, that's just how they're designed. As you get better, things just get harder. And, and then she goes, that's what makes the game fun, because if it were just like level 1, the entire game, you get bored real fast, because then you learn these different moves, you learn how to use these different power-ups or whatever. The controls are more comfortable, you get better upgrades, etc. And so that was a good lesson for me, because then I realized that, this is pretty normal in most walks of life. As you progress and as you gain more skills and as you gain progression in fitness or anything else along those lines, that things progressively do get difficult, and the problems that you have to solve do get harder and more specific. Because when you're a rookie, you can kind of get away with kind of doing broad things, like you just eat more vegetables, you just walk. But at some point, those things are going to be rendered ineffective, and then you're going to have to upgrade or get something specific in there. And then this is where most people fall off, because I can't tell you, for another example of this, I can't tell you how many times we've gotten people from either other gyms or like F45 or Orange Theory. And again, I'm not knocking on any of this, because it is a great way to get in the door and to get some baseline down. And I'm just speaking from what they told me, because I've never done it consistently. But from every single person who's come in from either like a boot camp style gym, like any one of those, is that, they make great progress in like a year, maybe even 2 years, 6 months, whatever. They're like, I lost a ton of weight, I got consistent, I'm really happy with my fitness, I got great cardio, and I was really happy. But they were like, something was missing. It just stopped seeing the same progress. And I'm like, and that's totally fine, because those programs are great for the general population, or for anyone to kind of get their feet wet. But then after that, you're going to need something more specific, and then the problems get more or just harder to solve in general, because that's just how it is, unfortunately, with fitness. And that's why coaching comes into play, and that's why people quit fitness so easily, is because they do see results in a short amount of time for the most part, and then from there they're like, well, what now? And then you have to have someone who's more advanced to get you to the next level. And then the thing is, if you stick with this fitness flywheel long enough, you'll reach a point to where the challenges you used to fear become your warm up. And I think we've all gotten there before. Like a good example is this podcast. Like I used to scrutinize over how am I going to say things. Like I would stutter a lot. I still stutter a lot, actually, so don't judge me. But I mean, it took me like an hour to set up my equipment for the first time. I still remember setting up. I'm like, this plug goes here, and I had like entire instructions and bullet points laid out, and I'm like, this is really overwhelming. I've never used audio gear before. But then now it's like I do it from memory. I plug in this here, I plug in this there. I set my camera up right here, hello, and I know where to set my mic. I know how to use the mixer and how to adjust the volume. I know how to edit it post. I know how to take out background noise. All these different skills also stack on top of each other, because once you get some basic stuff down and you're like, okay, I got a base here, that's easy. Now I can add this in. I can, for example, now like I'm editing a video, or I'm working on my audio on here. I'm like, I can clean up the audio. I can edit this out. I can color correct this. I can add subtitles to my videos, things like that. And you just make these subtle upgrades that over time you end up getting a full finished product, just like with your fitness. And you'll actually get addicted to leveling up instead of just trying to avoid the difficulty, because then it becomes fun. Then you're just kind of collecting add-ons. It's kind of like if you I don't know. Well, I haven't bought a house, but I just rented a house. And this is my first house I've lived in since I was 18. And so it's fun. Like, it's really fun at first, get the house. And then after that, you start, adding stuff, like add the podcast room. That was fun. Then after that, we added like a coffee machine. That was cool. And then we added a Traeger. That was cool. And you're just subtly adding these other things. And it becomes really fun because you're like, okay, cool. I'm kind of leveling up here. I'm leveling up here. And then the same thing applies to fitness. And you'll build a body and a mindset that make the rest of your life easier because you're the strongest that you've ever been. And that is really fun. It's really fun to level up in fitness, especially as you age. And believe me, it's worth it as you age because, again, I talk to people every single day who wait too long. They're in their 40s, in their 50s, they're 50% body fat, they're unmotivated, they have low energy, their visceral fat's at 20, they're so miserable and they're unhappy. And I'm like, better late than never, but man, this was preventable 20, 30 years ago. So don't be that person. You have to just accept the flywheel that I talked about and then accept that it's going to keep getting harder and harder. And that's okay. I mean, none of us signed contracts that our life would get easier as we got better. And that's just the reality of the situation. Like, this isn't some bedtime story or a Marvel movie where everybody wins at the end and the good guys always win. Unfortunately, in reality, we're going to have to get the down and dirty and just keep working and put our heads down and accept that it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot longer than what we like. And the plan here that I have for you, that I have stuck out, is that first off, you have to start where you are, that you just have to start with one workout, one habit, one step. And that's if you're a beginner. If you're already advanced, you're already doing this. Kudos to you. And then finally, we have to stack consistency. So consistency is show up when it's inconvenient or simply just doing the right things the right way at the right time for the right amount of time. And you have to build capacity. So we have to push intensity or volume slightly each week, but with structural deloads. And we do that automatically if you just show up to our classes. And then you have to dial in recovery, sleep, protein, hydration, basic nutrition, all that fun stuff. I'm not going to go into more details because personally, recovery is the most boring thing in the world, but it's extremely important. And again, this is where people mess up. And this is where I mess up the most, is in recovery. My sleep, protein, just basic nutrition and hydration, and managing my stress, which is hard to do for all of us, I would say. But that is the most underrated thing and the most boring thing to dial in. And unfortunately, boring is where we make the most progress. And that's also where the most people quit because it's boring. I mean, even the word boring is boring. Like, it's so boring. I might edit that out. So let's upgrade. You got to upgrade your problems. So one of my favorite quotes of all time, I can't remember who said it to me, but someone was pretty much putting me on my place. I don't know if it was a business mentor or something, but it was a great thing because I think I was complaining. And this person, God, I can't remember. This was so long ago. Who said this to me? Or did I hear it on it? I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, they just said, you know what, Matt? Find better problems. It's like, that's a good one. Like, find better problems. Yeah. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So upgrade your problems, embrace new skills and harder movements. That's always your goal, is to find better problems and then repeat. This flywheel compounds and you get better at it every time as long as you stick with it. And it's simple, but it's not easy, but it is guaranteed to work. And remember that most people quit not when it gets hard, but when it gets boring, because at least when it's hard, it can actually be interesting. And just usually when things are hard, and if you're that type of person, especially if you do CrossFit, you actually kind of like it because a challenge is fun, and it's fun to overcome challenges. And if you've done CrossFit before, you know that when you overcome a challenge, it's not nearly as challenging anymore. So there we go. And what this looks like for the future years is just imagine waking up with energy instead of dragging. Imagine walking into workouts confident instead of nervous. Imagine your doctor saying that your blood work looks the best it ever has. Imagine that being the parent who plays and not just watches or gets winded or out of breath. And imagine being the one that people look at and say, man, you are on another level. And that's what happens when the flywheel spins long enough. And most people quit because they think harder means that I'm failing. And this is more for people who are still kind of new to this. Once you overcome it, it becomes a lot easier. But no, harder just means that you're progressing. Usually the obstacle, just like the obstacle is away. Who is that? Ryan Holiday book? Great book, by the way. If you haven't read Obstacles Away, great book. Read that years ago. The real problem is misunderstanding the process. And this episode solves that by reframing the entire journey. That hard isn't a wall, that's a signal. And that hard means that you are leveling up, just like in my Zelda N64 Ocarina of Time. Great game. I should probably get an N64 for that. And The key takeaway from this, and I'll just repeat the flywheel again, because the key takeaway from this really is that progress is capacity, and that your life doesn't get lighter, that you just get stronger, and the fitness flywheel is the engine behind that. So once again, just to wrap things up, the fitness flywheel is that when you start training, energy improves. When energy improves, attendance improves. When attendance improves, that your strength and conditioning improve. When strength improves, workouts get harder. And then you can take on harder workouts, which means that it forces you to have better habits to recover from those harder workouts. So sleep, nutrition, recovery. And then from there, you need better habits equals performance spikes, and then performance spikes equals new problems show up, and then every level unlocks a harder level, and that's exactly how every single long-term transformation happens. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you guys next time. Good luck, have fun, and nailed it.